This March 21st meeting of the Senate Finance Committee will come to order. We have two bills on the agenda. Senate File 10, Senator Seeberger. Welcome to the Senate Finance Committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I am delighted to be here on my bill, Senate File number 10, which provides for safe and secure refineries in this state. This is my first appearance ever before the Finance Committee, so I'm thrilled to be here on this particular bill. I want to note a couple of important elements of this bill and the process it has undergone to reach the Senate Finance Committee. First, the apprenticeship ratio standard in SF10 does not apply to in-house workers hired directly by a refiner. I know that that's been a point of discussion as it's worked its way through the committee process. It only applies to outside contractors, many, if not most of whom I understand will be brought in on a relatively short-term basis. Second, this bill has undergone significant stakeholder discussion that resulted in substantial amendments to strengthen the bill and make it more workable. Among those changes was a delayed effective date and lowered apprenticeship ratios. And I'll also note that the bill includes a grandfather clause on lines 5.8 through 5.10, making clear that the bill only applies to contracts agreed to after the January 1st, 2024 effective date. And I'm comfortable that the bill already addresses the concerns expressed by the amendment author. If there's an amendment. I'm open to any questions you might have about my bill. I am very pleased with it and the process it has undergone to be here before you today.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? If not, we can begin with the fiscal note. Eric, I'm going to go ahead and present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Based on the first page of the fiscal note, you'll see the Department of Labor and Industry estimates earnings from penalties collected to the general fund of $5,000 per fiscal year. On the third page of the fiscal note, DLI, and in the assumptions section, DLI anticipates 2 complaints annually as a result from the requirements of this bill, and responding to the complaint inquiries would be immaterial for existing staff. So the agency estimates $5,000 in penalty revenue annually as a result of this bill, based on 1 compliance order being issued, finding 1 shift violation per year. Based off that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions on the fiscal note? Discussion of the bill. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll take the first question. Do we have anyone from DLI here today? Oh, there we go. Hi, Kate. Mr. We got this bill kind of late last year in the Jobs and Labor Committee, and I just have a question about the process of becoming registered, the process of or certified, or how long does that take? What are the criteria for that? What are the underlying statutes that manage that? Because I think I looked at the wrong statute last night.
Ms. Prushek, welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Kate Prushek, and I am Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Labor and Industry. Thank you, Senator Pratt. Nice to...
Mr. Chair, could I ask the testifier to get a little closer to the mic?
Sure, please.
Thanks.
Nice to see you again, Senator
You too.
Pratt. Good morning. Thank you for the question. So the Department of Labor and Industry, we are a state apprenticeship agency, so we have authority from the U.S. Department of Labor to register apprenticeship programs that conform to what's 29 CFR 29 and 29 CFR 30, and it's Minnesota Statutes Chapter 178. So in order to become a registered apprenticeship program, we have development specialists at the department that work exclusively with employers or potential sponsors who are interested in starting a registered apprenticeship program. So there are minimum requirements in law. It has to be an apprenticeable occupation, first and foremost, which the building construction trades are. has to provide a minimum of 144 hours per year of related technical instruction and a minimum of 2,000 hours of on-the-job learning. There are also a number of safety hours requirements, journey worker supervision requirements, and a progressively increasing schedule of wages. So the thinking is, as an apprentice goes through their program, they learn new skills and are paid accordingly as they learn those skills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ms. Peruchek, if I've got somebody at a refinery who's been working there, say, 20 years, and the law were to go into place, no safety issues with this employee, would they then have to go through the apprenticeship program? How, and let's say they're a non-union employee of a contractor, right? How would that 20-year employee become certified or registered?
Ms. Bruce?
Mr. Chair, so an employer would be able to register a program with a department as long as they meet state and federal requirements. And then a potential apprentice signs an apprentice agreement with their sponsor to proceed through the program. I will note, though, in the bill, there are minimum percentage requirements for the number of workers who need to meet the definition of a safe and skilled workforce. So there would be an opportunity for a worker who does not meet that definition to still work for that contractor and in the refinery.
Go ahead, Senator Pratt.
Thank you. So help me understand the timeline, right? So the law goes into place. I've been talking with folks about an employer that I have in my district who takes kids out of high school, trains them to take their journeyman test. He's not a registered apprenticeship program. So he's got this training program. How long would it take him to be registered? What would the cost be? What would the timeline be? What would who sets the standards? Are the standards transparently available?
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, yes. So the standards and the requirements are very clear in both the federal regulations and in state law. And so the process can take anywhere from a few weeks to a couple of months, depending on the amount of back and forth with our development specialists at the department. But we're actually moving to a new federal registered apprenticeship database system. It's called RAPIDS, and they have what's called a standards builder that actually walks employers and potential sponsors through the process of exactly the requirements that they need to meet to conform with the law.
Senator Pratt.
So thank you, Ms. Peruchek. So you had mentioned you had mentioned Chapter 178, and the statute I was looking at was 178.035, registration of apprenticeship programs. And I guess I was a little confused, and maybe you can clarify it. I've had some conversations, so maybe I'm confused, but it talks about that any application gets submitted to the union, and the union gets a chance to weigh in on it. Is that for any apprenticeship program, or is that only an apprenticeship program where union employees are going to be going through it?
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, the latter, only if there is current union participation in that program or with that employer.
I'll have some more questions, but I'll let some of the others go for now.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Senator Murphy and then Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Senator Seeberger, and welcome to your first visit to the Finance Committee. I recall this piece of legislation from my last term, and there was a fair amount of late in the session debate and action on the proposal, but it didn't make it into law. So I am curious if you could just ground us again in the why this is important. Why should we take this action I'd like to begin there, if you could.
Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Murphy, this bill came about due to concerns at oil refineries in the state about the level of training and skill level of workers in the refinery, and having to do specifically with turnarounds. So those are when the refinery shuts down, contractors come in to do some work and then leave. Oil refineries, as we know, are potentially pretty hazardous places to work. And we don't want anything to go wrong. We don't want anything catastrophic to happen. I think if we've learned anything, looking at the Husky refinery, for example, up in Duluth, that these things can be incredibly dangerous, and so we want the highest level of skilled worker in this facility. So because workers at a refinery within this state raise concerns about the skill level of workers coming in and doubts with regard to whether these folks had the skills necessary to ensure everybody's safety, my predecessor, former Senator Carla Bingham, began working with these folks to develop this bill to ensure that workers at our refineries were trained to a minimum threshold. The apprenticeship standard is the gold standard. It's the minimum threshold that we should be able to expect of our workers in these oil refineries. And so if there are workers in the refinery and that person doesn't know the person they're working next to, at least they can be assured that they can trust that this person is trained to an acceptable standard, so that they know that this guy next to them knows what they're doing, and they can trust them to act accordingly during these turnarounds and other work at the refineries. So that's the genesis of this bill. I think it's important to recognize that what we're talking about here are a threshold of safe and skilled workers having to do with contractors that come in while the plants are shut down during these turnovers. It's not employees hired by the refinery. So some of the concerns that I've heard are, you know, I've got a 20-year worker who's been working at this refinery. Does that mean now this person's out of a job? No, this bill doesn't apply to them. This bill applies to contractors who come in to do this work on a temporary and short-term basis. So with that in mind, while this bill has been undergoing its process, starting in 2021 and ending in 2023, there's been numerous discussions with the stakeholders. I will say that from the first hearing of this bill in labor during the, I think, the 6th day of session up until today, we've had many, many discussions with representatives from the Marathon Refinery, the Flint Hills Refinery, and numerous amendments have been adopted in this bill. It was heard first in labor, it passed through labor, it went to judiciary, it passed through judiciary, it went back to labor, passed through labor again, and now we're here. And in that process, numerous amendments have been adopted that have reflected the concerns of the stakeholders, that have reflected the concerns of the refineries, and that I think have made this bill really good. That is, I think, a long answer to your question, but I think accurately sums up the history of this bill, the why we're doing this, and kind of how we got here today.
And Mr. Chair,
Senator
thank
Murphy.
you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that, especially as we're talking about training and skill level. I grew up in a factory town where the plant would close down on a regular basis, annually or sometimes biannually, to retool the plant. And because it was such a fixture in our community, it was, when it shut down for that turnover, it was a part of our community. And what I remember, because my dad worked there, was the people who worked there, they had a real sense of solidarity with one another. This is the way we do our work together to make sure that everybody is safe on the inside of the plant. And they were experts. They were experts because their well-being and their lives and their limbs depended on their expertise. And so as I hear you talking about the turnover and the need to make sure that the people who are doing that work in that period of time are skilled at a level that the people who work there in the community that surrounds it have confidence, feels really critical to me. And the work of taking this bill through so many committees and the methodical nature of which you're describing the work makes me feel like the effort for this year in this proposal is going to make it stronger than where it was a year ago. And I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for that. I'm excited to vote for your bill.
Thank you. Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair Marty, and thank you, Senator, for bringing the bill forward and the discussion on the bill. So, looking over the bill, and I remember Senator Bigham bringing the bill forward in the past, and one of the things that caught my attention was the fact that we're going after a really specific industry. So this industry must be pretty dangerous. Can you give us a little background on, the safety record of this industry compared to other industries in our state?
Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Draheim. Well, we have a finite number of oil refineries in the state. I'm pleased to say that Flint Hills and Marathon have an excellent safety record, and to a great extent, most of them do. But again, I point to the Husky refinery situation. So even though I think there's a lot of attention paid to keeping these workplaces as safe as can possibly be, we have an instance that occurred very recently of where there was a problem. And thankfully, the Husky refinery incident was not any bigger, but I think it paints a picture of just how important it is that we pay so much attention to safety and ensuring that we have safe and skilled workers at these facilities.
Chair?
Senator Draheim.
Thank you. Well, I have some stats from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, just for our members here. When you look at injuries, the petroleum refineries have a rating of 0.5. And you look across the other sectors, air transportation, number of injuries per 100 full-time employees, it's a little over 6. Agriculture, it's a little under 5. Healthcare, 4.5. Manufacturing, 3.75. And then we have this industry at 0.5. So hats off to the refineries on the job they do in a very, very complicated work environment. I agree with that. But my issue has to do with the fact that when you have, from my understanding, when you have a kind of a turnover or a period of time where they're doing a bunch of repairs or updates, you could have thousands of workers come in to the refinery to do certain projects. And they have a track record of not having issues. And now we're going to limit who could come in. And I'm very concerned about that because from a business standpoint, time is money. And no employer wants anybody to get hurt. So I think most companies have instilled safety protocols for everybody on site that obviously are being followed because the stats show it according to our government. So can you tell me, is there other states that have imposed similar kind of laws?
Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Draheim, I'm going to get to your question, but I'd like to stress that a facility is not safe because it has never had a major accident. A facility is unsafe if it uses underskilled labor and has improper safety procedures. So I think we're lucky that there hasn't been any major safety incidences at the facilities at Flint Hills and Marathon. I think that speaks to the care that is taken by those facilities, but I also think it speaks to the need to ensure that we have safe and skilled workers there. In terms of other states, I'm wondering if I have others. Yeah. I have a testifier who can address the question of whether other states have similar legislation.
Mr. DeForest, welcome to the committee. Please be brief because I'd like to focus on finance issues here if we can, but go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, good morning. My state rep going all the way back to 1986 once upon a time, right? But anyway, in the interest of time, Mr. Chairman and Senator Draheim, to answer your question, there are 3 other jurisdictions that have similar legislation, New Jersey and Washington and California. I'd point out that California has had one of the largest refining states in the union, has had a similar law since 2013.
Follow-up, Chair? So was there a problem before they enacted these, and is there a statistical drop in incidents in these three states, and do you have some documentation for us for that?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Draheim, for specific statistics, I'd have to get back to you on that. But, one thing I would say in that regard is that anyone who's worked in the construction industry can tell you that not every unsafe act is reportable, or not even every unsafe act that is reportable gets reported. And so the genesis of the bill that was explained well by Senator Seeberger is that this really came from the bottom up. We have locals represented by the building and construction trades that pretty much service the refineries. And we heard from our rank and file up through the leadership, hey, these things are happening. What are you going to do about it? So sometimes we know that legislation is sort of top down or driven by leadership in certain organizations, but certainly is not the case. And I can also share with the committee, Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, actually one of our constituent union members commissioned a study with a lot of frontline worker firsthand witness accounts that were put in a compendium report that I would be happy to share that talks about some of these experiences and things that were witnessed. The Senate Labor Committee featured some of those witnesses testifying.
Thank you.
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your testimony. I guess the response of not everything gets reported could be true in all industries, and I'm sure it is true in all industries. So I frankly just don't buy that. If the goal is safety, then why are we excluding the merit shop pathway to work in these plants? Would be my next question.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Draheim, this bill does not exclude that pathway. Registered apprenticeship programs serve both union and non-union contractors, and my clients are very proud of the fact that registered apprenticeship programs, which are the gold standard in workforce development, are so closely associated with unions and union contractors. But as DLI could testify, or any state's registered apprenticeship program or the federal government, there are lots and lots of non-union contractors that have registered apprenticeship programs.
One last question.
Go ahead, Senator Draheim.
But you would agree that it does take years to set up a new program. So if there was a contractor that's currently working in this industry, they would take time to set up a program to qualify. If they had to hire new employees, as we all know, we have an aging workforce, especially in the trades. So it would kind of make sense that you would have younger people coming into the trade and have to put them on a pathway to get the apprenticeship.
Mr. DeForest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Draheim. talking about the nuts and bolts of standing up a registered apprenticeship program quickly gets beyond my level of knowledge and experience, but as you heard, the committee heard DLI testify, it's generally a matter of weeks and months. I can't speak to any particular contractor. I know that, certainly with our apprenticeship training programs, it has been my experience in general, my familiarity with them, is that we work very closely with our contractors, and frequently Line 3 is an example where we stood up a lot of specialized training in a very short period of time. So again, for me, the bottom line would just be refer back to Ms. Perushik's testimony from a few minutes ago.
Thank you.
Chair Marty,
Senator Draheim,
if I
yes.
could, I'd like to offer an oral amendment. If we're going to move forward with this, which it looks like we're going to, I think the industry needs a little more time to react. So I would like to push out the effective date on 5.8 for 2026. So I'd like to strike after the comma 2024 and insert 2026.
And Senator Draheim, I assume you would change the same on line 510 as well?
Correct. Thank you. Push out all the dates 2 years. So 2026 on line 5.1 and then 2025 to 2027.
Ms. Doyle-Fontaine, any comments?
No, Mr. Chair, members, and Senator Draheim. So it would be on line 5.8, delete 2024 and insert 2026. Line 5.10, delete 2024 and insert 2026, and delete 2025 and insert 2027.
Senator Seeberger on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Draheim, I am opposed to this oral amendment for a couple of reasons. Number one, this bill has undergone extensive working and reworking and negotiation from the beginning of this session until today. So it's been weeks and weeks and weeks of many conversations with and among the stakeholders to be able to present this bill to you in the form that it is today. Most importantly, however, this bill has been around since 2021. And I'd like to point out that not until this bill was heard in labor in early January did the refineries come to the table to negotiate. They were invited to make their opinions and thoughts known from 2021 onward and refused. The door was always open to hear their concerns. The door was always open to consider at what point they wanted these terms to start to apply, and they refused to come to the table. It is disingenuous at this point in the process now to ask that dates be extended when we're here at Finance, having been heard and passed through 3 other committee stops, and having this bill being out there since 2021. It's unreasonable to ask for any further time when they've had all the time that they wanted but refused to participate. So for those reasons, I would ask that this amendment not be adopted.
Chair Marty,
Senator Draheim.
if I could respond to that. I'm not doing this for the refineries. I'm doing this for the workers, for the subcontractors. I think we need to give time for the industry to adjust. The big multinational corporations that own the refineries will be fine. I'm more worried about the contractors. And so I think it's a reasonable request. We're extending it 2 years. 2024 is pretty quick. So I think it's a reasonable amendment, and I urge a yes vote.
Senator Pratt on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I want to reiterate what Senator Draheim just said. This is not about the refineries. It's about the subcontractors. And just to correct Senator Seeberger, since I was there, I can tell you that since 2021 there have been discussions going on. I was part of those discussions. Senator Rarick was part of those discussions. So I think it's erroneous to say that no one has stepped up to the table until now over the last 2 years, because I was in the room when some of those discussions were happening. Maybe not face-to-face, maybe they were going through us. But I do know that there were conversations going on behind the scenes for the last 2 years, and I just want to correct the record on that, Senator Seeberger, because I know from personal experience that you're mistaken.
On the Draheim amendment, further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion does not prevail. Further discussion on the bill. Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Seeberger. Could you tell me, had this bill been in place when Husky had their incident? Are you telling me that this would have prevented that from happening?
Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Dames, no, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that the Husky incident underscores the importance for as high a safety standard as we can make it in these oil refineries, and I think that's what my bill does.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Senator Dames.
Senator Seeberger, so what impact would this bill have had on that incident?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Dames. As I understand it, the Husky refinery had to do with a part, and I don't know that it would have, that didn't happen during a turnaround. So this wouldn't have addressed that particular situation.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Senator Dames.
Thank you, Senator Seeberger. So then why was this the highlight of one of the highlights of your presentation about Husky? You brought that up 2 or 3 times. So if this would have no implication on Husky and was a part instead of something else, why did this become kind of the center for your discussion today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Dames, again, I brought up Husky to underscore the importance of safety in these oil refineries and the need to ensure that we are as safe as possible with regard to our operation of refineries and to illustrate what can happen if things are not as safe as can possibly be. This bill addresses one portion of the overall safety measures that we can take with regard to refineries.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Senator Seeberger, you just said again to ensure safety. So can you give me an example of what type of safety issues this is going to ensure so we know who will be held accountable if that isn't the way it works out?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Dames, this bill ensures that workers who come in on turnarounds and other projects are skilled at a level necessary to ensure that they know what they're doing, in essence. And so that contractors workers who are there can know and can trust that the people alongside of them, working with them, are trained to a standard commensurate with what they are trained to. And so they understand that everybody pretty much knows what they're doing and they can trust the work of these folks.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
So, Senator Seeberger, so when you say that it ensures this safety, can you tell me that if it doesn't ensure the safety, who's going to be accountable for the lack of that insurance, for the lack of that something did happen? Who's going to be accountable for that? Because you're selling this to us as this is going to ensure this safety. So if that does not happen, is it the people that did the training that are going to be responsible? Who's going to be responsible for the loss if this doesn't ensure what you're indicating it's going to?
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, I'm not representing to the committee that this bill will ensure refineries are safe or that there will never be an incident at a refinery. That's not what I'm saying, and that's not what this bill does. What this bill does is establish minimum thresholds, minimum standards of the workers who come in on turnarounds and do the work, and makes sure that they are trained at a level that underscores the safety and the knowledge needed to come in and do that work. if a refinery has an incident that's outside the scope of what these workers are here to do, it has nothing to do with this bill. So this bill doesn't provide any insurance of any kind of safety measures, but what it does is assure us that the folks that come in to do the work are trained to a standard that recognizes minimum thresholds of training and skills necessary to come in and do that job.
Thank you, Senator Seeberger. Mr. Chair, a follow-up.
Go ahead.
Senator Seeberger, so let's talk about what happens within the scope that you keep talking about. It ensures, and so what is the scope then that this would apply to? I mean, somebody has to be held accountable if we're going to make these changes. So I'm trying to find out what scope it is that there's going to be accountability if this does not bring the safety that we're indicating and applying that it will.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, if you look at subdivision 4, which is on lines 1.8 through 1.23, 2.2, we have a mechanism in place for the commissioner to issue an order for the employer to comply, for various mechanisms to ensure compliance to various orders that are necessary. This bill speaks to the training level of workers. So it simply means that petroleum refineries must use a certain level of skilled and trained contractor workers in their contractor workforce. And to the extent that they don't, there's compliance provisions right on lines 1.8 through 2.2 of the bill.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Dames.
Senator Seeberger, can you tell me, when you got these folks together for these discussions and to get this worked out, at the end of the day, did you have a common agreement amongst all the players?
Senator Seeberger.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, on many terms of the bill, yes.
So that indicates there was parts of the bill, the answer would be no.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, Mr. De La Forest can go into further detail on that.
Mr. De La Forest.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Dames, thanks for the question. Right, I guess I'm one of the few people left who's been with this bill from the very beginning and have had the opportunity to speak with counterparties, especially here starting in January, thankfully. But I would say, I would never presume to speak for them, but having been a part of these discussions, I would say that on nearly all the issues, there are agreement. There's not agreement on all aspects of the bill, but nearly all of those outstanding issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Follow-up.
Go ahead, Senator Dames.
Were the subcontractors invited into these negotiations?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Dames, my negotiations have always been with the parties that are held accountable under this for the most part, and that is the refiners. I know that there have been more extensive meetings that were held under the auspices of various senators who called them, but my negotiations have been nearly exclusively with Marathon and Flint Hills.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Senator Dames.
Senator Seeberger, you had made a comment that this applied to short-term contracts. So could you tell me what you meant by short-term contract time-wise?
Go ahead, Senator.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dames, these are workers that come in for refinery turnarounds. Perhaps Mr. De La Forest can describe what that is and what that entails, the work?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Dames, it may vary. I think what we're talking about for the most part when you're looking at maintenance work or perhaps even a lengthy turnaround at one of the facilities, you're talking about contractors that could be hired for as short as a couple of days, or they may be in for a couple of months. But I think that is in the main the experience.
A follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Senator Dames.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if it's a long-term contract, and there are instances, I'm sure, to where the refineries will hire an organization to bring in folks, and maybe it's a project that's a year long. I would consider that to be a long-term contract. So listening to what we're hearing in the testimony here, these people then would not be obligated to meet these requirements because it'd be a long-term contract versus a short-term contract. Is that correct or incorrect?
Mr. Diegoforth.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Dames, I would point to the definition. It applies to outside contractors, and that would be regardless of the length of the contract. But I would also point out that at the end of the bill, the last subdivision is what we call a grandfather clause, which was added at the request of the refiners, which allows contracts in existence prior to the effective date of the bill to go on for upwards of another year. But to answer your question succinctly, it applies to all outside contractors and does not take into account the length potentially of any of those contracts. But of course, if the contractor is otherwise qualified, they could have, hypothetically, a contract up, 100 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Seeberger.
Senator Friends, then Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Seeberger. This bill has been a long time coming, and I want to acknowledge your work and also appreciate very much your recognition of Senator Bigham for the work we're talking about here. Members, I think we've lost our focus a tiny bit. We're worried here because of the possibility of a refinery explosion. We're worried here because there may be a toxic exposure to the public, and I'm especially worried about an injury or death to a worker. And so your bill makes those things less likely. You've had a lot of questions about what might happen. You're making those things less often. You're taking away some of the risk. And the reason I'll be a yes vote in your bill, Senator Seeberger, is because you are clearly making the public and the men and women who work there safer. I think we should err on the side of safer workplaces, not just for the men and women who do the work, but for all the public. Thank you very much, Senator Seeberger, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members, and Senator Seeberger. I have, just human recollection of that refinery explosion that happened back in 2018, and I know there were a lot of injuries to workers that happened in that moment, and it is the thing that you're working, from my perspective, to prevent. None of us, and as policymakers, none of us want workers to get hurt on the job. And this session, there are a number of proposals coming through the legislature to improve worker safety, this being an important one from my perspective. And again, I want to thank you for doing that. I understand that following that explosion at the Husky refinery, there was a review of what happened by the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board that cited failures of improper safety standards, poor emergency preparedness, and undertrained and unskilled workers. I appreciate very much the intervention that you're taking, that you are focusing on a key point, the turnover, where people are coming in from the outside to retool a workplace, where if the people are not properly trained, could create a risk for the workers that are come back and work and for the community that surrounds it. I think that intervention is targeted and smart, and I appreciate it and have faith that it will prevent injury down the line, which is why I think it's so important. Thank you.
Senator Murphy moves that Senate File 10 be recommended pass. Is there further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion prevails. Senator Seeberger, thanks for the bill. We may have to recess for about 2 minutes till we can get Senator Wiklund from her committee. So we'll recess for 2 minutes. This meeting of the Finance Committee will come back to order. We saw you were in the middle of a debate or discussion in your own committee when we called you. Thank you for joining us. Senate File 2265, Senator Wiklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for accommodating me. Senate File 2265 relates to the public health emergency ending, and currently we are in a situation where we have not been doing eligibility renewals, eligibility checks. This began in March of 2020. DHS stopped most of the annual eligibility renewals and other eligibility checks. This was a condition of enhanced federal funding during the pandemic, that we maintain all of the public program coverage as a continuous coverage. So at the end of last year, Congress passed language that it untied the continuous coverage provisions from the public health emergency, and they stated that continuous coverage will end on March 31st. Medicaid redeterminations may begin as early as April 1st. So if states do meet certain requirements, we can remain eligible for enhanced federal funding. And the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they continue to provide guidance to the states on what they need to do as they move forward with the redetermination process. So this is a really huge effort by the state and by counties to go through and do redetermination of eligibility for all public program participants. And the goals of the period now that we're entering are to maintain coverage for all eligible enrollees without interruptions, and to comply with evolving federal guidance. So at this point, the DHS has been preparing, and the counties have been preparing for April 1st as the date when these redeterminations will begin. The renewal process will begin again on April 1st. There will be 12 monthly cohorts of medical assistance renewals, and so they will be proceeding through these cohorts to reach out to them, reach out to the individuals. This is a very paper-intensive process, and the counties and will have to be contacting all of the enrollees to get updated information and determine whether they're still eligible for Medicaid or Minnesota Care, or if they're not, to help them understand what coverage options they do have available, through the individual marketplace, for example. So this bill is to provide some additional policy language and some guidance that the state will be following, along with some appropriations that will help the counties and the state move forward with the redetermination process as we need to. And I do have an amendment, the A10 amendment.
Senator Wiklund, the A10 amendment is in the packets for members. Do you want to explain do you want to go through it, or you want?
There were some changes that were recommended by from DHS, some technical assistance in terms of the bill that we passed out of my committee a couple weeks ago, and those are reflected. One change is that the commissioner will waive Minnesota Care premiums for all enrollees for the period of the redetermination process. And that is being done so that we can keep from erroneously canceling and during the unwinding period, preventing erroneous charges, and to set system changes so that members aren't notified that they're that they have a premium charge, and then receive another notification that they're having to redetermine their coverage. So that is one of the changes in the amendment. Also, there's some advice from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services that certain procedural terminations must be suspended. And then a new Section 3, which puts in place the correct appropriation language. And there is an appropriation for the Department of Human Services. There is also an appropriation for the counties. And then there are grants to navigators. Navigators have not been performing nearly as many interactions with enrollees because of the continuous enrollment process. And so now that there will be all of these people that need to be redetermined, the navigator role is extremely important. And so there is funding that is being allocated for grants to navigators.
Is there discussion on the amendment? Do we want to have Mr. Albrecht go through
I was going to say, if you wanted to have Mr. Albrecht go through, or Mr. Nolan.
Mr. Albrecht, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't know you came over.
We have a sheet in our packets on the spreadsheet of the dollar amounts and so on.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members. The spreadsheet titled Senate File 2265 Appropriations has a total general fund net effect of $58.6 million. The purposes in the general fund are listed under the subheading of general fund. There's $4.5 million for medical assistance, $23.3 million for administration, $1.8 million for systems, and then the grants to the counties of $36 million that Senator Wiklund mentioned. In human services, the state receives an approximately 32% contribution from the federal government for administrative expenses, for most administrative expenses, and that is the $7.1 million reduction that's labeled FFP offset, bringing the total for the general fund to $58.6 million. There are also appropriations and effects in the healthcare access fund that are described in the next section. One of the sections, I think is section 3, cancels an appropriation from fiscal year 2023 of $1.936 million, which is then included with $3 additional million in fiscal year 2024 for grants to navigators. And the waiving of Minnesota Care premiums that Senator Wiklund described has a revenue loss in the Healthcare Access Fund of $5.3 million. And because the premiums for Minnesota Care are statutorily appropriated, there is a related reduction in the statutory appropriation of $5.3 million. And then the appropriation comes along to replace that lost premium revenue of $5.3 million for a total effect in the Healthcare Access Fund in 24-25 of $10.3 million.
Thank you, and I'll point out that I talked with Senator Wiklund about how this will be part of the HHS budget targets when they come out. Is there a discussion on the amendment? If not, Senator Wiklund moves the A10 amendment be included. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails.
Mr. Chair.
On the bill, yes.
One other area I didn't really highlight was that the reason that we're here today to pass this bill is that we have some work that we want to get done before April 1st. To continue receiving the enhanced federal funding to support public health care programs in Minnesota, DHS needs to submit a mitigation plan to CMS that is approved and implemented before April 1st of this year. Without a mitigation plan, this would likely result in a loss of about $117 million in federal funding. A mitigation plan would demonstrate to the federal government that no enrollees are likely to lose health care coverage unnecessarily, and that the state has adequate plans in place to prevent this from happening. The unwinding package that I've described includes funding that helps the state meet these obligations. While DHS has a plan, without funding, they cannot implement the plan. And passing this package as soon as possible before the April 1st deadline will help to alleviate the risk that Minnesota loses the $117 million from the federal government. So,
Further discussion on the bill. Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair Marty. Administration, I see that's about 40%. Can you just give a brief description of what that all entails?
do you have a description of what's including?
Mr. Albrecht, or you wanted to have somebody from DHS come up?
Mr. Chair and Senator Draheim, it is a very labor-intensive, and Senator Wiklund mentioned that it's largely paper-based. It is, I believe, something on the order of 111 FTEs in order, temporary over a short period of time to handle all of that. There is some amount included in there for professional technical contracts. That's around $9 million. And then the systems money is shown separately at the $1.8 million.
Thank you.
Ms. Ashby, do you have any more comments about administrative things and how it looks like the counties have the bulk of the money on this, but
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair. Anna Ashby with the Department of Human Services. Mr. Albrecht is correct. There is some money for contracting for a vendor for project management to also complete task orders related to things that we need to, for example, provide training to counties and tribes and other processing entities. There's also funding for temporary staff to assist with renewals, both DHS is largely responsible for Minnesota care renewals. The counties and tribes largely process medical assistance renewals, and so there's funding both for the additional Minnesota care renewals that we're likely to see as a result of this. There's also a backup sort of rapid response team for staff to be able to take on any bottlenecks that are happening with counties or tribes as they are processing a record amount of renewals. So there's staffing, there's printing and postage, there's a minimal amount of systems funding to make some necessary systems changes to try to alleviate some of those manual processes, and then there's a little bit of contract funding in there as well.
And Ms. Ashby, if something, you're breaking up into 12 cohorts, 1/12 each month, if there's a glitch along the way, these are complex cases, and if these folks lose their coverage, especially certain people with complex medical conditions, do you have a way that does it stop the next month or something, or you just have to figure it out as you go?
Mr. Chair, we do need to figure it out as we go. We do have several kind of different mitigation strategies to address when that sort of backlog seems to happen, and some of that additional staffing that Mr. Albrecht outlined is part of that plan.
Okay, thank you. Any further? Senator Dames.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Wiklund, maybe you can help me here. Maybe I missed something, but on the sheet that was passed out that Mr. Albrecht talked about, it shows that in 24-25 the cost would be $58.6 million roughly. If you take the amendment, as I see it, and add that up, just 24 is about $74 million. So am I missing something, or does the amendment bring the value up that much, or the cost up that much?
Mr. Albrecht.
Mr. Chair and Senator Dames, if you look on the spreadsheet that goes with the bill, there is a line on there that says FFP offset. of $7
Yep.
million. That is a reduction in the general fund, but the appropriation amount includes that amount. It is returned to the state after the fact and is non-dedicated revenue in the general fund.
So that would make up 7 million of the difference.
Mr. Chair and Senator Dames, the balance is in the second section in the Healthcare Access Fund. I think if you read the appropriations carefully, there is a combination of general fund appropriations and Healthcare Access Fund appropriations.
Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, Senator Wiklund moves that Senate File 2265 as amended be recommended to pass. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Senator Wiklund, thank you, and thank you all for being here, and welcome back to your old committee, your other committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
With that, this meeting is, there are no more Finance Committee meetings this week. We'll likely meet at least once next week. With that, this meeting's adjourned.
And then